Welcome back. So in this video, we'll see how to promote a member server as a domain controller. So generally, when you install a Windows Server 2019 or even the older versions, after installing the operating system alone, the particular system will be a member server. By default, that particular system will be a member of a work group. So generally, when you want to uh, create a domain or when you want to manage all the users centrally, manage all the computers centrally, and manage the authentication centrally. So basically, we need to create a domain where we need a domain controller. So basically, in Windows environment, a computer which is installed with Active Directory is going to be a domain controller. And now we'll see how to configure the member server as a domain controller. And for configuring a member server as a domain controller, so basically it has to be installed with the Active Directory domain service. So by installing Active Directory domain service, we can configure a member server as a domain controller. So there are few requirements to install the Active Directory domain service. So the first important is obviously we need a Windows Server operating system, and that particular server should have at least one network interface card, and that network interface card, the link should be up and the driver should be installed, and the network interface card should be configured with the static IP address along with the preferred DNS IP, and also any one of the partitions should be of NTFS file system. So on satisfying all these requirements, we can install Active Directory domain service and we can promote the server as a domain controller. And now we'll move on to the practical demonstration. And here I have a server which is installed with the operating system alone, and by default this particular system is a member of a work group. And here you can see the computer name is server 01 and it is member of work group. I just want to increase the size of the display, so let me change the settings. Okay, so now I think it would be better. Yeah, so here you can see the computer name. I have renamed it as server 01 and by default it is in a work group. And let us check the uh, file system. We have the C drive, and the C drive is already formatted with NTFS file system. So we have the first requirement satisfied. The second requirement is the network interface card driver should be installed and IP address should be configured. So let me open the network connections. So for which we can use the command ncpa.cpl from the run prompt. And here you can see the network connections is open, and here you can see Ethernet 0. So only when the network driver is installed you'll be able to see the Ethernet interface here. And here you can see the interface is, the link is also up. So now we can configure the static IP for this particular interface. So select the IP version 4, go to properties, and we can use the particular IP. Let me use the IP 192.168.0.131 as the IP, and configure the subnet mask. And if you have multiple subnets in your environment, or even you're connecting with another multiple networks, in that case you can use the gateway. Since this is the demo environment, I'm having only one network for this demo, so I don't want to give the gateway basically. And the preferred DNS. So basically when you want to configure a domain, Active Directory domain, so where Active Directory service will be working on integration with DNS. So for better running or a good working of Active Directory service, it requires the DNS to be installed, and the DNS service should be working and the domain name should be resolved. So basically for configuring Active Directory service, so DNS service is also is essential. And the preferred DNS server IP, you need to mention the computer which is going to be configured as the DNS server. And for now I'm going to configure this server itself as the DNS server, so that's why I'm giving the same server's IP address. So it is always recommended to configure DNS in the same server in which you are installing the Active Directory service. So basically, Active Directory service will be integrated with the DNS so that DNS resource records will be stored in Active Directory and all the domain controller service records will be created automatically. So it's always recommended to configure DNS and Active Directory service in the same computer. Since I'm configuring Active Directory service in the same computer, I'm giving the same computer's IP address for you here. Then click OK, then close. And now the IP address is configured and preferred DNS IP is configured. So now we can start installing Active Directory service. For installing Active Directory service, open Server Manager. Under Dashboard, you can find Add Roles and Features and proceed with that. Under installation type, you need to select the role-based or feature-based installation, then proceed next. And under the destination server, select the server in which you want to install the role. So I want to install the role in the server 01, so select the same server, then proceed next. So under roles, you can find Active Directory domain service. When you select that, it will ask you to add the administrative tools which is required for the Active Directory administration. So just press on the add features. So by clicking on this button, all the required features will get installed automatically. Then you can proceed next. And since all the features has been selected in the previous step itself, so in the features you need not to select anything particularly. You can proceed next. Then you can press install. So now the Active Directory domain service is getting installed. So once the Active Directory domain service getting installed, so the next stage is to promote the member server as a domain controller. So at the end of the role installation wizard, you can see an option which says uh, that promote the server to a domain controller. So you can just wait for a while. So it'll take maybe 1 or 2 minutes to complete the installation. So based on your server's performance, the duration may vary. The role installation is done, and here you can see the option promote this server to a domain controller. You can just click on this option straight away. So you can see the Active Directory configuration wizard has been started. Maybe some cases you may miss this instead of pressing promote this domain controller to promote the server to a domain controller. You may miss to select this. You may close this. So in that cases, what you can do is under that task details, you can see the pending tasks. So from here, you can proceed promote this server to a domain controller. And if you want to add a server as a domain additional domain controller for the existing domain, you can choose the first option. Or if you want to create another domain like a child domain, in that case, you can go with the second option. Since here we are going to create a new domain and a collection of domain, we call it as a domain tree and a domain forest. So we are going to create the first domain in our domain forest. So you can choose the option add a new forest, and here you can give any name for your domain. So let me give the name as cometlab.com. You can give whatever the name you want, so it's up to your choice. So always you should give the name as a DNS name. So DNS names in the sense the name should have some dot extension. So any name with a dot extension, we call it as a DNS name. And for your domain, you need to give the domain DNS name. And after giving the domain DNS name, you can proceed next. And the next stage, you'll be asked to uh, uh, select the function level, forest function level, and of domain function level. So forest function level is basically out of all your domain controllers. in what functional level it should work, either it should work in the 2016 level or 2012 level. As if in case you have the older version of the domain controllers running, in that case you can go with the older version of the functional level. And once all the domain controllers has been upgraded to the latest one, so in that case you can change this function level to the latest one, so where the domain controller will you will work with the latest features and the latest functionalities of the latest operating system. So similarly, you can choose the domain function level. So the forest function level says about your domain controllers of the entire forest. And the domain function level says in what level your domain should work. It means that the domain controllers of that particular domain, what in what level it should work. And also, as I said earlier, for a working of Active Directory service, so DNS is essential. Again, it's an optional configuration. It's up to your choice, but it is always recommended to configure DNS integrated with Active Directory. And also, for a good working of a domain, a global catalog service is required. And in the future videos, we'll be discussing about global catalog. So basically, the global catalog is essential for user authentication, and the configuration is a mandatory configuration. So every domain, at least, it should have a global catalog server. So by default, this particular domain controller will be configured as a global catalog server. So you'll not have option to remove this configuration. But where in DNS, you'll have the option to uh, uh, do the configuration later also. As I said earlier, DNS configuration is always recommended to do along with the Active Directory configuration. And here we need to configure the DSRM password. So basically, DSRM is Directory Service Restore Mode password, or Directory Service Recovery password. So basically, when you install the operating system, maybe Windows Server 2012 or 2016 or 2019, uh, whenever you install the operating system, while installing the operating system, we used to configure the administrator password. So basically, the administrator account which is created while installing the operating system is the local administrator account. But when you install the Active Directory service, basically the local administrator account will get disabled, and domain administrator account will be created. So basically, the local administrator's password will be taken as the domain administrator's password by default. And also, usually we used to take the backup of Active Directory regularly. So where we'll take the system state backup of the domain controllers, maybe on the daily basis or based on whatever the schedule you have in your organization. So the backup of Active Directory can be taken when the operating system is running in the normal running mode. But whenever if there is any issue, if you want to restore the Active Directory from the backup, so in the normal mode, that is when the operating system is running in the regular mode, the backup cannot be, that is the Active Directory cannot be restored from the backup. So if you want to restore the Active Directory from the backup, so basically you need to reboot the server. When you press F8, when the operating system is starting, when you press F8, you'll get the advanced boot options. So in the advanced boot options, you'll get a few options like a safe mode with command prompt, or safe mode with network, or something like that. So in the same advanced menu, you can find a option called data service repair mode or data service restore mode. So when you want to restore the system state backup, that is if you want to restore the Active Directory service, so you need to reboot the server in the data service restore mode. So when you boot in that mode, basically the Active Directory service will not be running. So since the Active Directory service is not running, the Active Directory service the Active Directory service database, which will not be used by the service. So in that case, it will allow you to restore the Active Directory backup. So when you boot the server in a directory service restore mode or a repair mode, as I said earlier, Active Directory service will not be running. So if the Active Directory service is not running, so you'll not be able to log in as a domain administrator. And also, while installing the Active Directory service, local admin password, local admin account also was got disabled. So while you are putting into the DSRM mode, so if you want to log in into the server, so basically you'll have a user account called a DSRM administrator. So for that DSRM administrator, what should be the password? So that should be configured here. So basically the password what you configure here, which is going to be used whenever you're restoring the Active Directory service, that is whenever you are booting your server in DSRM mode, in that time you can use this password for your administrator account, so using which you can log on to the DSRM mode and you can restore the Active Directory database. So, and this password you should keep it safe and also secure. So, whenever maybe while creating the domain or while configuring the domain, one particular person will be doing this. Maybe in future, uh, some other employee may be doing the same the restoration task. So only when you have the administrator, that is DSRM password in a proper document, so then only the other engineer who is going to use the password, he'll be able to do that. So always it is recommended to document this DSRM password somewhere, and that should be kept in a secure location, so only the intended users should have access to that password. And after configuring the DSRM password, we can proceed next. And here it is asking for you get a warning message saying that the delegation for DNS server cannot be created because the authorized parent zone cannot be found. This is a quite regular or a normal warning message, because till now the DNS is not configured, so that's why we have this warning message. So you can ignore this warning message and you can proceed next. And earlier we gave a name for DNS name for our domain, and also for a domain, a NetBIOS name also will get assigned, and the NetBIOS name will be derived from the DNS name which we have given earlier. So basically the NetBIOS name is a flat name without any dot extensions. So earlier we gave the domain name as cometlab.com. So here it is taking the cometlab alone or living.com aside, and basically this particular name can be used within the local area network for accessing or connecting the particular domain. Then you can proceed next. And to add more, this NetBIOS name, it need not to be the same. It shall be different from the DNS name. Maybe your NetBIOS name, your DNS name shall be cometlab.com, and your NetBIOS name for the same domain shall be cometlab internal, something like that. So it is not that the DNS name and the NetBIOS name of the particular domain should be same or should be matching. It is not like that. You can choose whatever the name you want. And finally, here we need to define the location where you want to store the Active Directory database. So basically, by default, it takes the Windows directory slash NTDS as the location to store the Active Directory database. So basically, the Active Directory database will be stored in a file called ntds.dit. So this particular file ntds.dit will be stored inside this particular path. So this is taken by default. If you want, you can change the path, but it is not mostly done. So usually we go with the default directory location, and also the log folder for the NTDS database. And also you need to configure the sysvol folder, which is going to be used uh, to store the domain public files. So basically this folder sysvol directory will be a shared directory by default, and also this particular directory has to be parked in a NTFS partition, because since the directory is going to be created as a shared directory, so it should have more security. So that's why it is recommended to store this particular sysvol directory inside a NTFS partition. Then you can proceed next. And this is the final summary. So whatever the configuration you have given, if you want, you can review, and if any changes has to be done, you can go back and change, or otherwise if everything is okay, you can proceed further, press next. So initially it will check the prerequisites. So once the prerequisites validation is successfully done, so then we'll be allowed to install the Active Directory service. And here we can see all prerequisite check has passed successfully. Now we can begin the installation by pressing this install. And this installation will take a while, maybe sometimes 2 to 3 minutes or 5 minutes or even 7 minutes. So based on your system configuration, the duration may vary. So, and here you can see the progress. So here you can see initially the DNS installation is uh, done, and now the DNS configuration and the group policy management console installation. So whatever is happening on the background, you can verify over here. So once the configuration is done, automatically the domain controller will restart. Now once this Active Directory service is installed, so this particular computer is no more a regular server. So this is a domain controller, and here you can see the role installation is done, and it is automatically getting restarted. So you're getting the warning message that you are about to be signed out. So you need not to do any action. You can just sit and watch. So automatically the server will reboot, and once the server has been rebooted and is back and up, so then your domain controller and your domain is ready for your use. And my domain controller is starting for the first time after installing the Active Directory service. So generally, after installing Active Directory service, when you reboot the server or if automatically it gets rebooted, so it'll take some more time, because after the installation, when the server is rebooted for the first time, the DNS configuration and the other configuration will take a while. So maybe comparing to the previous reboots, after installing Active Directory service, the reboot may take a 1 minute or 1.5 minutes more than the earlier time. And of here you can witness it is taking a bit longer than usual. So we'll just wait for a while. And now the domain controller got rebooted, and here we can see automatically it is taking the domain administrator account. Maybe if we try to log in as the local administrator, let us see what happens. And still you can see it is logging in as the domain administrator. So basically, after installing the Active Directory service, the local administrator account will get disabled. So we can also verify the same from computer management, local users and groups. And here you can see under computer management, you are not seeing the local users and groups. So you cannot log into the domain controller as the local administrator. So you'll be allowed to log in only as the domain administrator. And after installing Active Directory service, you can go to the server manager tools from where you can see the Active Directory users and computers, and where you can see the domain which you have created, comatlab.com. And under the domain you can find the users, so where you can see the default user administrator account is created, and also few more default groups has been created. And that's all for configuring the member server as a domain controller. And the rest of the topics we'll be discussing in the upcoming videos. Until then, bye bye.